Have you ever loved someone who didn't love you back? Not just unreciprocated affection, but that deep, aching kind of love where you gave your heart, your presence, your energy, and still found yourself treated like a temporary option. While some women walk into a room and effortlessly captivate, leaving men enchanted and unable to look away, you're left wondering why you always seem to be the one forgotten. Ignored. Chosen last or not at all. Why is it that certain women seem to awaken something in a man's soul, while others, no matter how giving, are only remembered when it's convenient? Carl Jung once said, "What you do not face within yourself becomes your fate." And perhaps that's where the answer begins. Because the truth is, this isn't about beauty or charm or how much you're willing to sacrifice. It's about energy, about psychology, about a depth most never dare to cultivate. What if I told you that the reason a man cannot fall deeply in love with you is not because you're not enough, but because you've never been taught how to turn your own presence into a force of gravity? And no, this isn't about changing who you are. It's about remembering what you were never taught, reclaiming what was always yours. So if you've ever felt that silent pain of being overlooked, of being almost loved, of being nearly chosen, then stay with me, because by the end of this video, you'll understand something most women never do. And once you see it, you won't need to chase love ever again. You'll become the kind of woman he cannot forget. The kind of woman he falls for without even understanding why. Carl Jung once said that men are drawn to the image of the anima, the unconscious feminine imprint within their psyche. This isn't just a poetic idea. It's a psychological truth that explains why men fall in love the way they do, often without understanding why. Men don't fall for logic. They don't fall for a checklist. They fall for a feeling. And the women they fall hardest for, the ones they cannot stop thinking about, are not always the most beautiful, the most impressive, or the most accomplished. They're the women who awaken something within them. They stir the unconscious. They reflect an internal yearning that words can't describe. Because what a man loves is not a person. What he loves is a sensation, a version of himself that he experiences only when he is with her. Think about that. It's not about what you have, it's about what he feels in your presence. That's the hidden language of attraction. That's what Jung meant when he spoke of the anima. Every man carries a blueprint of the woman who moves him at the soul level. And it's not always based on the real world. It's born of symbols, memories, emotions buried deep. So here's the part no one tells you. When you try to become what you think a man wants, when you adjust your personality, change your words, shrink your presence to be more likable, you step away from that power. You become forgettable. Because you're no longer connected to your own essence. And only a woman in full possession of her essence can awaken the unconscious in a man. Let me tell you a story. Years ago, a man met a woman at a small bookshop in a quiet corner of town. She wasn't what the world would call stunning. She didn't wear revealing clothes. She didn't flirt. She wasn't loud. In fact, she was the opposite: quiet, grounded, calm. She asked questions no one else dared to ask. She listened without rushing to respond. She seemed completely at peace with who she was. He didn't fall for her instantly. But after that day, he couldn't stop thinking about her. Something about her stayed with him. Her voice, her energy, the way she didn't perform. She made him feel something he hadn't felt in years, like he could be fully himself and still be deeply seen. He went on with his life, dated other women, but none of them touched him the way she did. Because they didn't reflect that quiet truth he found in her presence. They didn't make him feel more himself. And that is the secret. The women who leave the deepest mark are not the loudest, not the flashiest. They are the ones who mirror back a man's truth. They don't chase. They don't manipulate. They embody. And in doing so, they become unforgettable. So if you've been trying to win someone's heart by being what you think they want, start by asking yourself, how do people feel in my presence? Do they feel seen? Do they feel calm? Do they feel inspired? Because the moment you stop trying to impress and start learning how to connect with yourself, something shifts. You no longer walk into a room needing validation. You walk in holding a presence that speaks louder than words. Men are drawn to women who don't seek to be chosen. They're drawn to the ones who have already chosen themselves. the ones who carry a quiet confidence, a knowing, a warmth that doesn't burn, it radiates. Jung understood that real love begins in the unconscious. And to touch the unconscious, you have to be more than appealing. You have to be real. You have to embody a feeling that he cannot find anywhere else. That is how love begins, not with logic, not with strategy, but with a feeling so intimate, so familiar, it feels like home. And when a man finds that feeling in you, he won't just want you. He'll crave the version of himself that only exists in your presence. And that, more than beauty, more than perfection, is what makes you unforgettable. There's a kind of energy in certain women that makes a man fall, not just for her beauty, not for her words, but for the way he feels around her. It's not loud. It doesn't demand attention. It doesn't seek validation. It simply is. This energy is not about trying harder. It's about being deeper. And when a woman embodies it, she becomes unforgettably, not because she chased, but because she stayed still. Let's begin with the first element of this energy: feminine stillness. There is something magnetic about a woman who does not chase. She doesn't try to fill every silence. She doesn't rush to explain herself. She doesn't adjust her presence to make others comfortable. Instead, she sits in her own essence like it is a throne. Calm, composed, clear. Stillness is not passive. It is powerful, and it's rare. Feminine stillness is the ability to hold space without rushing to fill it. It's the refusal to pursue what is not aligned. It's choosing not to react, not out of indifference, but out of strength. When a woman carries this stillness, she becomes a mystery, not because she hides, but because she doesn't overexpose. Stillness says, I do not need to chase anything. What is meant for me will come. And in a world where everyone is screaming to be seen, a woman who is quietly rooted in herself becomes irresistible. This leads us to the second element: full presence. We live in a distracted world. Our minds are elsewhere. Our eyes are on screens. Our conversations are half-hearted. But when a woman is fully present, when she looks at someone and really sees them, it creates a kind of intimacy that words cannot replicate. Presence is the most valuable gift you can offer another human being. It is the ability to be with someone, truly with them, without rushing, without trying to fix, without drifting away in thought. A man feels this. He knows when your mind is elsewhere. He also knows when your heart is in the room with him. Presence isn't about being perfect. It's about being real. Being there. When you sit across from him and listen without judgment. When your gaze stays steady. When your voice moves with intention instead of impulse, you become unforgettable. Because you offer him something that most of the world cannot. The feeling of being fully seen. And here's the secret. When you offer that kind of presence, you don't just change how he sees you. You change how he sees himself. Now let's talk about the third element. Being not easily accessed. This is not about playing games. This is not about being manipulative or withholding affection to gain control. This is about honoring your value. Men fall deeper for what they have to earn, not because they want to win a prize, but because effort creates investment. It forges emotional weight. When a woman is too available, when she gives too much too soon, she robs a man of the opportunity to rise into his own desire. But when she sets boundaries, when she honors her space and doesn't rush to prove herself, she allows the relationship to unfold with integrity. There is a sacredness in not being easily accessed. It teaches a man that your energy is precious, that your time is not guaranteed, that your presence is a privilege, not an entitlement. And here's where Carl Jung's shadow theory becomes deeply relevant. Women who have not healed their inner wounds often give too much. They overextend. They lower their standards. Why? Because deep down, they fear rejection. They confuse being chosen with being safe. But the women who know their worth, the ones who've done the work, don't need to be chosen to feel whole. They choose themselves first. And that energy is undeniable. A woman who guards her heart not out of fear, but out of self-respect, is deeply attractive, because she is not acting from a wound. She is acting from wisdom. These three elements: stillness, presence, and sacred boundaries form a magnetic field. A man doesn't fall in love because you chase him. He falls in love when he feels drawn towards something in you that he can't explain. A softness that doesn't bend for approval. A strength that doesn't demand control. A grace that flows without effort. You don't need to be more beautiful. You need to be more rooted. You don't need to talk more. You need to be more present. You don't need to give more. You need to trust that the right man will be moved by the right energy. That energy begins the moment you stop seeking permission to be yourself and start honoring the parts of you the world once told you to silence. And when you do, love won't be something you have to chase. It will be something you naturally attract. Because nothing is more magnetic than a woman who has made peace with herself. There are women who know how to attract men, but very few who know how to keep themes specially on an emotional soul-deep level. Not because they lack beauty or kindness or effort, but because they fall into patterns that quietly dismantle intimacy over time. Let's talk about the mistakes that prevent a man from truly loving you for the long haul. The first is this: demanding rather than inspiring. You may have heard or even said it yourself. I just want to feel safe with him. On the surface, that sounds reasonable. But when that desire turns into a repeated demand, when a man feels like he's constantly being asked to prove his love, his loyalty, his intentions, it begins to suffocate the space between you. Because love is not a test. And a man doesn't fall deeper when he feels evaluated. He falls deeper when he feels trusted. Men need to feel that they are trusted, even when they don't have everything figured out. When a woman constantly seeks reassurance when she says, "Show me I'm safe," again and again, it doesn't make him rise. It makes him retreat. The truth is, emotional safety is something we build with ourselves first. No one can hand it to us. And when a man senses that your emotional stability is dependent on his every move, it creates pressure rather than connection. Instead of demanding safety, become the kind of woman who creates it from within. When a man feels that you are rooted in yourself, that you're not waiting for him to complete you, something opens in him. He feels drawn to protect, to support, to show up not because he has to, but because he wants to. That's the difference between demand and inspiration. One pushes, the other pulls. The second mistake is never giving him a chance to be the hero. Carl Jung believed that men are constantly striving toward individuation, the realization of the self. In other words, men are wired to seek a sense of meaning, of evolution, of becoming. They want to feel needed in a way that empowers them. But when a woman does everything, when she fixes, controls, leads every moment of the relationship, he loses the opportunity to rise. He no longer feels like a contributor. He starts to feel redundant. The deepest connections happen when each person has a role in the relationship that allows them to grow. And for a man, part of that is feeling useful. Feeling like he makes your life better, not because you can't do it yourself, but because you've made space for his effort to matter. It's not about being helpless. It's about being receptive. When you let him lead sometimes, when you ask for his input, when you allow yourself to receive without apologizing for it, you give him the gift of purpose, and he will associate that sense of value with you. But if you always control the direction, if you never let him offer, protect, or guide, the relationship starts to feel one-sided. And deep down, men don't stay where they feel useless. They stay where they feel alive. The third mistake is trying to manage his emotions. So many women fall into this without realizing it. You notice he's quiet, and you assume he's pulling away. He says something sharp, and you rush to fix it. He has a bad day, and you panic that it's your fault. So you adjust. You over-explain. You over-apologize. You try to pull him out of moods. Read between every line. Anticipate every shift. But here's the truth. The more you try to manage his emotional state, the more he feels controlled, and the more you lose touch with your feminine energy. Feminine energy isn't about solving. It's about trusting. A man's emotional landscape is his own. And when he's with a woman who lets him have his emotions without interference, who holds space but doesn't try to fix, she learns to trust her presence. But when he feels monitored, corrected, or manipulated even gently, He will guard himself. He may stay physically close, but emotionally he pulls away, because real connection only grows where there is freedom. Trying to control his feelings may come from a good place, your own fear, your own need for security, but it pushes him away. The more you attempt to control, the less he feels safe being real with you. What he needs is your trust. Trust in his process. Trust in his ability to return. Trust in your own worth, regardless of his mood. When you stop managing and start allowing, you invite a deeper version of him to step forward. So remember this. Men fall in love with women who make them feel free, not trapped, inspired, not evaluated, invited, not instructed. If you can hold your center instead of chasing his comfort, if you can allow his masculine energy to rise instead of replacing it with your own, and if you can stop trying to perfect every emotional moment and simply be there, you'll unlock a kind of connection that cannot be shaken. And the love that lasts isn't built on control. It's built on space, on freedom, on trust, and most of all, on presence. There is something profoundly magnetic about a woman who has made peace with herself. She doesn't chase love. She doesn't wait for validation. She doesn't perform to be chosen. She simply exists with a calm, grounded sense of knowing, and somehow that alone becomes unforgettable. Carl Jung called this the process of individuation. It's not just a concept. It's a journey. A slow, often uncomfortable evolution in which you stop living through borrowed expectations and begin living from the inside out. Individuation is the process of becoming whole, and not perfect, but whole. It's when you stop being fragments of what others wanted you to be and start becoming who you were always meant to be. This isn't about self-improvement. It's not about becoming better for someone else. It's about becoming more of yourself. And here's the paradox. When a woman embarks on this journey not to attract love, but to rediscover her own, she becomes the kind of presence that draws others in without trying. Because her energy says, I'm not searching. I've already found myself. Men are drawn to this deeply. They may not be able to explain it, but they feel it. A woman who carries this level of self-possession speaks to something ancient inside a man. Not the part that wants to dominate or fix, but the part that longs to evolve, to rise, to meet her where she already stands. Jung once said, "The woman who does not need to be rescued becomes the mirror through which a man must confront himself." That kind of woman doesn't beg for attention. She commands presence through stillness, through self-knowledge, through the absence of desperation. And when a man meets her, he senses something different. He realizes, I can't play small with her. I can't offer half-hearted love. I can't hide behind charm or performance. If I want to stay, I have to grow. I have to meet her with the same wholeness she's found in herself. That's the power of feminine individuation. It transforms a woman from someone who waits to be loved into someone who becomes love itself. She doesn't need to convince anyone of her worth. It's woven into every word she speaks, every silence she holds, every boundary she honors. She is not cold. She is clear. She is not intimidating. She is honest. She is not detached. She is discerning. And because of that, she becomes a spiritual force. She's no longer the girl who loses herself in every connection. She's the woman who invites others to rise just by standing fully in her own energy. This kind of woman doesn't use her wounds to manipulate. She's faced them. She's sat with her own shadow. She's cried in silence. She's chosen healing over approval. And now, she's no longer afraid of being alone because she's met herself in the quiet and discovered someone she actually likes. That's why she's powerful. Because the love she wants is no longer based on filling a void. It's about expanding her already full life with someone who can meet her there. This is what makes her attractive, and not from a place of effort, but from essence. She walks into a room and doesn't need to say much. Her presence says it for her. She knows her own thoughts. She trusts her intuition. She doesn't over-explain, over-apologize, or over-give. She gives from overflow, not lack. And the right man doesn't just notice either is transformed by it. Because in a world where so many people are trying to be chosen, she is choosing herself, again and again. And that self-devotion creates a gravitational pull. This kind of love isn't born from performance. It's born from alignment. When you stop abandoning yourself to fit into someone else's arms, you send a signal to the universe. I'm ready for real. I'm ready for depth. I'm ready for a connection that doesn't require me to shrink. That's what individuation does. It strips away the masks, the people-pleasing, the fear of being too much, the fear of not being enough. It replaces it with self-trust. And that trust becomes a light that says, I am already home. You're welcome here, but only if you bring your full self too. So if you want to become magnetic, not in a fleeting way, but in a soul-deep way, begin with this. Stop trying to be loved. Start learning to love the woman you are when no one is watching. Stand still long enough to meet her. Listen to her. Heal what she hides. Give her back. Her voice. Her space, her dignity, and watch what happens. The world around you will shift. Men will respond differently. Conversations will feel deeper. You will stop being chased for your appearance and start being remembered for your energy. Because the woman who has found herself doesn't need to be followed. She leads, and not through dominance, but through embodiment. She becomes the standard, not for perfection, but for wholeness. There's no trick, no gimmick, no phrase you can say that will magically make a man fall in love. But there is a path, a way of being, a presence that draws him in not because you demand it, but because you embody it. This isn't about manipulation, it's about magnetism, and it begins with depth. Step 1. Become a woman of depth. Most people today are moving too fast to be seen. Conversations are shallow. Emotions are rushed. We share too much too soon, trying to prove that we're interesting. But love doesn't grow in exposure. It grows in curiosity. Instead of telling him who you are, become someone worth discovering. Think of yourself as a novel he cannot put down, not because you're hiding anything, but because you've mastered the art of unfolding. You don't need to explain your every thought. You don't need to overshare to be understood. In fact, the less you reveal, the more he leans in. Not out of confusion, but out of intrigue. He senses that there's more to you. That every time he's with you, another layer is revealed. That's what creates longing. That's what creates connection. And it's not about being mysterious for the sake of mystery. It's about having a rich inner world, a life, a purpose, a truth that runs deeper than what's visible on the surface. When a man senses that you are not performing, but truly living from that depth, something shifts inside him. He starts to ask questions. He starts to feel things. He begins to wonder how he can be part of your story, not because you've sold yourself to him, but because he wants to read on. Which brings us to step 2. Lead with energy, not words. Words are helpful, but they only touch the conscious mind. What pulls a man deeper is not what you say, it's what he feels around you. Your energy speaks long before your mouth opens. The way you look at him without flinching, the pause you take before answering, the way you inhale calmly instead of reacting quickly. These are signals that reach beyond logic. They move through the nervous system. They touch memory, instinct, longing. We are wired to respond to subtle cues. Your softness, your groundedness, your ability to be present without chasing or performing these things awaken something primal in him. And he may not even know why, but he feels drawn. You don't need to dominate a room to be powerful. You don't need to fight for his attention. Just become a woman who is so at peace with herself that her presence alone creates curiosity. Let your eyes say what your words never need to. Let your silence speak confidence, not fear. Let your body language tell the story of someone who doesn't need to prove her worth because she knows it. That is the language men remember. Not the clever phrase, not the perfect response, but the feeling they had in your presence. And that feeling becomes their reference point for what connection truly means. Finally, step 3. Don't try to make him fall in love. Let him have no choice. When you live from your truth, when you stop chasing and start radiating, when your presence becomes a reflection of self-worth and softness, doesn't fall because you asked him to. He falls because you become unforgettable. The women who are loved deeply aren't the ones who try the hardest. They're the ones who know themselves best. They don't beg for love. They embody it. They don't try to be perfect. They're real, grounded, emotionally intelligent and fully alive. And that's what makes them impossible to ignore. When a man feels more connected to himself in your presence, when he feels both challenged and comforted, when he senses that you don't need him but still choose to invite him in, that's when love becomes inevitable. You're not trying to win him. You're simply living in such a way that he sees something in you he can't find anywhere else. And he doesn't love you because you asked him to. He loves you because in a world full of noise and performance, you felt like peace, you felt like truth, you felt like home. That is the secret. Stop focusing on being chosen. Focus on becoming someone unforgettable. When you do, you won't need to convince anyone to stay. They'll feel it in their soul, and they won't want to leave. There was once a woman who spent years being the one who waited. She waited for the text, for the call, for the moment he would finally see her worth. She gave more than she had, smiled through disappointments, made excuses for men who offered half their hearts and expected all of hers. She was the woman who was always almost loved, the one who was good enough but never quite chosen. And every time it ended, she thought maybe it was her fault. Maybe she needed to be softer or stronger or quieter or more. So she bent, she adjusted, she shrank, until one day, something broke, but not in the way she feared. It wasn't the kind of break that destroys. It was the kind that opens. Something in her spirit whispered, enough. And for the first time, she listened. She stopped chasing, stopped asking why, stopped begging for closure from people who couldn't even offer clarity. She turned inward, into the silence, into the ache, into the long-forgotten parts of herself that she'd buried under the need to be loved. It was painful at first, lonely, quiet in a way that made her question everything. But the longer she stayed with herself, the more she remembered who she really was. Not someone waiting to be chosen, but someone worthy, simply by existing. She started doing things not to impress, but to nourish. She spoke slower, walked softer, Saturday longer with her own thoughts. And something began to shift. She no longer needed anyone. And that was the moment everything changed. Men noticed. Not because she tried, but because she didn't. Her energy had changed. She wasn't performing anymore. She wasn't waiting. She wasn't afraid of being alone. She was radiating self-possession, and it was undeniable. And the men who came toward her now faced a choice. Love her deeply, truthfully, fully, or disappear, because she was no longer available for half-love. And here's the truth. When you love yourself at that depth, you don't ask people to meet you there. They either rise on their own or fall away. And either outcome is peace. Because once you've met your own soul, once you've stood in your own stillness and learned to hold your self-love, becomes a gift, not a lifeline. And the world, including the men in it, responds not to your need but to your wholeness. If something inside you stirred while listening to this, if you felt even the smallest part of your heart, exhale, as if it had been holding its breath for too long, then this message was meant for you. You're not here by accident. You're here because some part of you is waking up. Some part of you is tired of performing, tired of shrinking, tired of giving your light away in the hopes that someone will finally see it. Maybe you've spent years trying to be enough. For him, for them, for the world. And maybe, just maybe, today is the first time you've paused long enough to ask, what if I was always enough? If you are on the journey back to yourself, even if it's messy, even if it's quiet, even if no one else understands it, leave a sign below this video. Not for me, for you. A moment of truth, a declaration, a gentle whisper to the universe that you're coming home. You don't need to write a paragraph. A single word is enough. A moment of presence is enough. And if something here resonated, if you felt seen, if you felt understood, if you felt less alone, then follow this channel. Not because you're supposed to, not because it's the polite thing to do, but because you deserve to keep hearing reminders of your own power, your own beauty, your own wholeness. Let this be your space, where you're not asked to change, where you're not told to be quieter or softer or more agreeable, where you're reminded that you don't need to be chosen to matter. Because here's the truth. You don't need to be chosen. You only need to be yourself. And that is enough to change everything.